Thanks. I'm actually okay for now.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Next question goes to Justin Chandler from TVO. Justin, you can go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So essentially, the city has said earlier that it couldn't really seek consent for a project that had been ordered by the province. And as I understand it, sort of just through the recap here, the city's been working with the HDI, trying to go through different processes as are established under our laws and processes. But it seems like despite that, sort of things are still breaking down. Does this show that there's a need for a new type of consultation process that the city might need to adopt or is perhaps considering?
So I can take that one too, unless you wanted to jump in, Carlyle.
I can start and then you can add to it, Nick. I think at the end of the day, the Ministry of the Environment, the Crown, there's a duty to consult, and that's what we're trying to do. Our conversations and when we consult is a two-way street where we listen to both perspectives and then we land on what's best for the project, what's best for the community. Consent is a different scenario. Consent implies or suggests that we need approval to get the works done. That's where the challenge is. Nick, anything else to add or?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right.
So then I guess my...
Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess my follow-up then to that would be as far as the question then of consent versus consultation, like does that factor into, does there need to be sort of a change in how the idea of consent is viewed?
To answer that, I think that's why we're seeking advice from the Ministry of the Environment, is we have gone through measures to consult with. We've provided technical information. We're trying to move this project forward. The request on the other side is for consent and approval, which we cannot give.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Next questions go to Bobby Restova from CBC. Bobby, please go ahead.
Thank you. I hope everyone is having a good morning, had a good long weekend. My first question, this deadline extension request. So I understand the current deadline is kind of the end of December 31st of this year. And if I heard that correctly, December 1st, 2023, that's almost a full year. Can you explain why you're asking for almost a full year in terms of that deadline extension?
I'm happy to take that if you want, Carlo.
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. And to be clear, Bobby, thank you for the question. The revised deadline that we've requested from the Ministry of the Environment is December 31st, 2023. So it is a full year from the current date required for completion of the project. And it really speaks to the uncertainty of how we move forward given where we are late in 2022. There are a number of complicating factors to delivering a project like this. That includes the associated permits that have been applied for and provided to the city based on the work we did for those submissions. Those will require renewal, certainly, if they're not unable to be extended, and it's unknown at this point in time what additional work might be required in order to either have those permits renewed or to make new submissions. There is a period every year where the city is not allowed to perform in-water works. That's between March 15th and July 15th. And that's to protect fish spawning periods as well as some other sensitive conditions for habitat that are present during those periods of the year. The other factor that needs to be considered is, how best to move forward with the project at this point in time, assuming we can get in and get started. And that's something our consultant, who is WSP, formerly Wood, is working on presently, scenarios. If the ministry meets our requests and uses their legislative authority to help provide safe and unimpeded access for this work to progress, we're not certain at this point in time if we are best served by moving forward essentially this fall, winter, and getting as much of the work done as we can, and then returning to the project when we're able in 2023, or if it's going to be less disruptive, essentially to demobilize the project at this point in time and start fresh later in 2023 when we're able to do so. So I guess that's a really long way of saying there's a lot of details that still need to be figured out. Things on this project have been changing almost on a daily basis for the past month and a half. And we as a city, we are going to need time to regroup, deliver or figure out the best way to deliver this project, and the real timelines associated with that. You know, it would be our best intent to have this done as early in 2023 as we possibly could, but we do want to make sure that we've got time available should we run into unforeseen circumstances.
Okay, thank you. My second question, Carlyle, you mentioned that there was engagement. It was unsuccessful. Can you be more specific? What about the communication is breaking down? Is it the fee for the engagement? It was, you know, that they were saying something between 300 and 500,000, or I don't know if that number is off or not, but they mentioned, you know, thousands of dollars in terms of a fee for engagement. Is it what part of the consultations or engagements falling apart here? Because they just keep repeatedly saying there hasn't been meaningful consultation and that they're coming to the table, but you aren't. Can you just clear that up a bit? It's confusing why there's two totally different sides to this story here.
Thank you for the question, Bobby. Early 2021, the city started the consultation exercise and started to describe the project, talk about the technical details. And the First Nations communities, they attended and they participated. HDI, along the way, there was a pause in communication. Part of the challenge is that as we move forward, there's this continual request for consent and approval, something that we cannot give as a municipality. So we're challenged with that. Nick, is there anything else you want to add on that in terms of 2021 and the consent process? Or the consultation process, sorry.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Carlyle. You know, the city had reached out to the Haudenosaunee Development Institute in February of 2021 to begin the consultation process. And we were immediately met with requirements that the city was going to be unable to agree to, particularly that consent and approval piece. You know, recognizing that we're under orders from the ministry to move forward with this project, you know, things are moving very quickly through the design phases of this and engaging in all the work that needed to be done to submit successfully the applications for those permits. You know, there's been a lot of work since that point in time, trying to find a path forward with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy through the HDI. And unfortunately, I mean, and again, you mentioned, Bobby, we've seen some changing demands. You know, initially we were told if we got into an environmental monitoring agreement that the project would be able to move forward fairly quickly. We found a path to make that happen. After that, and if folks have participated or watched the video from the September 7th General Issues Committee meeting, there was a request made that the city engage in a process whereby consent and approval would be sought for, you know, just about every approval that the or just about every project, excuse me, that the municipality delivers, which I'm sure you can understand was a very large consideration, but it was also tied to moving forward with this project, something that the city couldn't do. And then we've seen some changes with regards to what type of financial exposure would the city and the community be subjected to in order to participate in the process that's been laid out by the Haudenosaunee Development Institute. Initially, we were advised somewhere in the realm of $13,000 to $25,000. And that number has continued to change over the past month. And the most recent request of $350,000, it's far above and beyond what has been requested by the other Indigenous nations. And it's also beyond any authority that city staff have to provide that type of funding to one of the Indigenous nations as part of this project.
And just to add to that response, the City of Hamilton City Council, through our report, they endorsed the recommendation that we continue with consultation and we enter into monitoring agreements. We've successfully done that with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and we continue to work with 6 nations of the Grand River and the Huron-Wendat to achieve that. So we continue to consult with and we continue to enter into monitoring agreements as per authority granted by City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. And next questions go to Jason Gaidola from CHCH. Jason, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Again, good morning, everybody. I guess to follow up on from Bobby there. Clearly, the latest request was around $350,000. I've seen the documentation of that, and but you've also mentioned that you went into an agreement with the Mississauga of the Credits. What is the agreement financially with the Mississauga of the Credits in comparison to what the Haudenosaunee is currently asking for?
So I can take that question. Thank you, Jason. So the agreement with the Mississaugas speaks to an hourly rate for an environmental monitor or environmental monitors from that nation, as well as other provisions, such as mileage compensation for travel, per diem should it become necessary in order to support the project overtime. This is a 12-hour project where a lot of projects are 8 hours a day. So it covers off all those bases. The important consideration for the city, given the authority that's been provided to us by council and the available project budget, was to negotiate a cap for the cost that the city would incur potentially for environmental monitoring. The cap in that agreement is $40,000 for the dredging period of the project, with provisions to take a look at that should unforeseen circumstances arise that would result in additional monitoring or other requirements. But certainly, we see that as a reasonable upper limit for this type of participation in the project.
I'd really like to highlight that part of the agreements too are the safety aspects. Monitors are on site, they check in with the contractor, they wear safety apparel, PPE, protective equipment, and they follow the direction of the contractor.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess my follow-up question, I'm assuming is HDI, is their offer still at $350,000? Have you heard anything where they're possibly asking for more or maybe willing to negotiate for less? I just want to know what the situation is at that point right now.
I don't think from the city's perspective it's changed, and we're really unable to comment on their position.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Next, we'll go to Edwin Thomas with the McMaster Silhouette. Edwin, please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I noticed that there was a meeting with representatives of the district office last Tuesday, and we kind of talked about how discussed about extensions and stuff. And I was wondering if they kind of provided any temporary solutions or any plans for the interactions with the HDI, besides, just talking about extending the project completely.
Happy to take that question, Edwin. Thank you very much. So I can tell you that the conversations with the ministry have been supportive. They're certainly understanding of the situation that the city and the community are in with results with respect to this project. but they haven't offered us any solutions at this point in time coming from their participation or available legislative powers. We've suggested or requested intervention from them via our communication last week.
Thank you. My next question is, given this almost 1 year delay on this project, or the extension that you're requesting for, what are the costs that are going to be associated with this?
Thank you, Edwin. That's to be determined, unfortunately, and there's a lot of unknowns that have been created, unfortunately, because of our inability to move this work forward within the defined project timeline and the defined budget. So, those unknowns include costs related to permit extensions or resubmission for permit applications, potentially demobilizing and remobilizing a contractor. I'm sure that I'm missing some. Carrie, sorry, if I can ask Director Vanderperk if she's got things on her mind that I didn't include.
Sure, thanks, Nick. I think one of the things that we also have to consider is keeping the Cage Park recreational facility closed for the remainder of 2023. So any potential revenue generated by that park will cease until the DMMA, or the dredge material management area, has been cleared out and restored back to its original intent as a park.
Thank you, Carrie. And the other thing that was on my mind that I got stuck on was we're uncertain what the consulting support fees would look like. That it's all based on the potential pass forward for completion of the project and the differing timelines associated with different options.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Edwin. Next, we'll go to Matthew Van Dongen from the Hamilton Spectator. Matt, you can go ahead.
Thanks very much. I was hoping someone could clarify for me. I had heard that perhaps the city would seek a court injunction to allow this project to go ahead, but it looks like you're going a different route. Could you tell me what the difference is between that option and what you have asked the province to do?
I'll start with answer that question. I think when you look at the different paths forward, ultimately because of the cold weather setting in and because of the spawning habits of the fish in that area, it's unlikely that if we were to start right now, we would complete it. An injunction would be probably a more intense response, severe response, and right now we're not there yet, especially given the fact that the consultant is evaluating our path forward. Should we start the work now and continue next year, or should we just pause and wait till next year? So ultimately, we need to figure out our strategy forward based on all the parameters, and then we'll look at we'll discuss with different stakeholders on how we should move forward best.
Yes, but sorry, then could you further explain then what you've asked the province for in terms of relief?
In terms of relief, we've asked the province to issue order to the HDI to basically allow the city to proceed with the work, or the city's contractor to proceed with the work unencumbered. In addition, we've asked for extension to December 31st, 2023.
Okay, and you haven't heard back then on the request for an order?
Correct. That went in late last week, if not Friday. So we're waiting for a response.
Okay, and just to clarify then, and I'll be done. You have yet to make the decision on whether you'll resume work this year, regardless.
Correct. I can see Nick wants to respond, but ultimately the consultant is evaluating that right now, and they will give us a recommendation. But Nick, if you want to add to that.
Thank you, Carlyle. The only thing that I was going to add is that we're not going to know if we're going to be able to proceed until we hear back from the ministry based on the request we submitted. And it was last Thursday, end of day, that letter was submitted to them.
Okay. And is there a last gasp date by which you must make that decision?
So I don't believe so. Unfortunately, given where we are in October, we don't believe that the December 31st completion of the remediation work in Chedoke is achievable. And there were already unknowns, Matthew, with our ability to work later into December as it was. In our conversations with our contractor, given their experience with this type of work, typically they would shut down operations in mid-December. It would be unusual for them to try to complete this type of operation during the winter months. So first step is we need to hear from the ministry regarding our request, and then based off that request, we'll have to make some decisions here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. So we do have time to go through another round of media questions if media partners do have any follow-up questions. So I will go back to Ken Mann from CHML. Ken, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thanks, Jen. I'm okay.
Great, thanks, Ken. And next we'll go to Justin from TVO. Justin, any follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, what are the environmental consequences of this delay for the creek as far as leaving it undredged for maybe up to a year longer?
So I'm happy to take that question. Thank you, Justin. So the material that we're trying to remove from the bottom of the creek, the sediment that's associated with the spill, it has high concentrations of nitrogen and it has high concentrations of phosphorus. So the environmental consequences is, as long as the water is in contact with that sediment, based on different factors such as temperature, there's a potential for those nutrients to leach out into the water and contribute to accelerated growth of vegetative material, which has impacts within the watershed on things like dissolved oxygen, algae blooms, things like that. So, the longer that the material is there and available to interact with that water phase, then there's potential impacts from that perspective.
Thank you. And I'm also wondering, I believe it was in The Spectator, Aaron Delter with the HDI wrote that there was only a limited stretch of the creek that was being cleaned and that was insufficient. And I'm wondering what the city's response to that charge is.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I'd say I think we've been completely transparent about what it is that we're trying to achieve with the remediation. As part of our assessments that were required in advance to satisfy sections of the orders from the ministry was to look at the amount of material associated with the spill that remained within Chedoke Creek and what has dispersed out into Cootes Paradise in the harbor. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'll ask Carrie to correct me if she has the answers in front of her and I get this wrong. But approximately 45% of the nitrogen that could be associated with the spill is contained in the sediment that's at the bottom of the creek, and the phosphorus, I think, was lower. It was in around 25%. So the requirements of the order don't limit us just to working within Chedoke Creek. There's also the Cootes Paradise work plan. And the intent in the order as a whole is to mitigate the impacts of the spill, but we have to do it in different ways. So we can remove a bunch of the nutrients associated with the spill by dredging Chedoke Creek, and we're calling it targeted dredging for a reason, because there's areas where sediment is deposited, there's areas where there's no sediment deposited, and the reason for that is depth of the water, velocity of the flow in those areas. I mean, there's natural reasons why sediment deposits in certain areas of a water course and it doesn't. So we're removing those sediments that are within the creek that are associated with the spill. The Cootes Paradise work plan looks at what else can we do to offset or make up for those nutrient loadings that made their way into Cootes Paradise and into Hamilton Harbor, but that we can't recover by dredging. And Carrie's the expert on this part of it, so maybe I can ask her briefly just to touch on what some of those things would look like.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. So I guess the first step that we have to undertake as a municipality is an environmental assessment. So we currently have 3 environmental assessments that are ongoing that have kicked off within the last few months. And that's really to look at all of the potential options that are available to us to mitigate the water quality levels within Cootes Paradise. And the surrounding area and the watershed in general. So that's really the first step. And that EA process is, it's a typical environmental assessment process. We follow the provincial guidelines for that. And we're really looking at options such as, is there a treatment method that's appropriate for the watershed areas with regards to stormwater, with regards to surface water runoff. It's really taking in all of the considerations of the landscape and determining the most suitable solutions for the water quality issues. So those are some of the things that we'll be looking at in terms of, is there in situ type of water treatment that we can install in the area for the surface water or the storm water? Is there work that we can do on our civic golf courses? Is there work that we can do upstream to mitigate some of the the phosphorus levels that are coming in from just surface runoff from farmlands, et cetera. So there's quite a few solutions that we can look at, and that EA process will allow us to do that.
Okay. Thanks, Justin, for your questions. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I would. I guess just as far as some of these processes that the city is still looking at, as far as I guess communications with the HDI group and trying to work things out. Has there been talk with the province, or could there be talk with the province as far as trying to I don't know, I guess bringing all parties together if this is something that the city needs the province's help with?
I think the easy
Go ahead,
response
Carlyle.
on that one is yes, the city would be open to that. We will work with all parties, all stakeholders in terms of finding a resolution and being able to move forward with the requirements of the order and the work that needs to get done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Next, we'll go back to Bobby with CBC. Bobby, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Earlier, someone had mentioned that there'd been some 40 instances of, situations of people, occupying the area, maybe kayaks, but some sort of, stuff in the water. You'd even mentioned someone getting in one of those dredging machines there. Of these instances, how many times have police been called? Has anyone been charged or arrested?
So happy to take that question, Bobby. The police have been called, I believe 3 times. First on August the 18th. Again on, if I just check my calendar here, on October the 6th. And then again on October the 10th, and for different reasons. The October 10th call was from our contractor who'd identified a break-in and some theft of equipment. We've had conversations with Hamilton Police about this issue and what support is potentially available from them and what's appropriate based on the scenario. So I would say that there's been consistent communication with Hamilton Police Services over a period of time related to this, but they've only been called 3 times.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to ask more about that, but I don't want to waste my second question here, which is, if the ministry gets back to you and says, actually, we're not going to extend the deadline by a year, what will you do? What's next?
So the city's absolutely committed to meeting our requirements and obligations to the Ministry of the Environment and the provincial government under that legislation. We would have to see exactly what their response is. is there a happy medium from an extension that they provided, and what can we do to meet that date? And certainly, that's the type of analysis that we would conduct and report back to them on the achievability of anything they put in front of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Next, we'll go to back to Jason from CHCH. Jason, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, shifting back to, I guess, the negotiations portion of the situation, given the fact that you've already reached an agreement with the Mississaugas of the credit and the ongoing discussions with Huron-Wendat and Six Nations, has the HDI stalemate, has that impacted those negotiations? And, if so, how?
I think at this point, thank you for the question, Jason. At this point, it's hard to determine that. We respect consultation and the process within, and we also recognize that each First Nations community is unique, and they have a process that we try to follow. And what may be acceptable to one may be slightly different to the other. So we're going to continue to make every effort to have those discussions with them. But if it comes down to approval and consent, then that's something as a municipality we don't have the ability to grant.
Thank you. And I guess also shifting back to the municipal projects that HDI was wanting final say on, was there any specific projects they were alluding to that they wanted that kind of, I guess, like final approval and power into that decision making? Was there any specific projects that they mentioned?
So the HDI did attend the Public Works Committee. I think it was late August. At that point in time, they said all public works projects.
Awesome. Thank you.
And sorry, if I can just jump in there, because I want to make sure that that we're accurate. I think you're probably referring to the General Issues Committee meeting, Carlyle, on September 7th.
Correct, sorry. General Issues Committee.
Okay, thank you for the questions, Jason. Next, we'll go back to Edwin from the Silhouette. Edwin, you can go ahead if you have any follow-up questions.
Perfect, thank you. Kind of related to what Jason was talking about in the first question. So for these environmental monitors and their cap of $40,000, I believe Nick mentioned, would the extension that's being requested right now count as one of these unforeseen issues that you mentioned would impact the amount of money that will be given to them? And if so, by how much?
Thank you for the question, Edwin. I'd say potentially. The agreement that we have negotiated with the Mississaugas does include provisions for, it stipulates when monitors will be paid and when they won't. So if there's no work going on, then certainly we're not going to pay for monitoring. If there's changing timeframes associated with the project, then we'll have to take that into consideration with these monitoring agreements.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Any follow-up question?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that concludes our media questions for today. I would just turn to our spokespersons to see if anyone would like to provide any closing remarks, clarifications, anything of that nature before we close out the briefing.
So maybe I'll jump in and speak to, I think, Bobby's questions with regards to engagement of the police. And the only thing I'd say is, it's not unusual for a municipal project to encounter issues with trespassing or vandalism or things like that. And it's simply part of a normal process to engage the police if and when we encounter those types of issues. So I guess what I'd like the media to know is that there's a lot of projects where we engage consistently with the police throughout periods of a project, and this one's no different.
I think I'd like to add in closing that, you know, the city and our staff remain committed to meeting the intent of the order. Environmental stewardship is something that we hold as top priority. We continue to do that. We will continue to work with all stakeholders in terms of moving forward. We need to get to a positive outcome. I think it only serves kind of the city of Hamilton well in doing so. And, you know, whatever it takes, we will keep putting our best efforts forward as we meet the challenges that we face. But thank you for attending this conference.
Thank you both. Appreciate your closing comments and all of your responses to our media partners' questions today. So with that, thanks very much, Justin. Appreciate you joining us. That concludes our availability for today. If members of the media do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Norm Miller, and we'll endeavor to help you get the additional information you're looking for. Thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope you have a good day.